guys, it's Caroline Grace, and today I'm going to do a story time. Today I'm going to be reading you two short stories, the first of which was an old story of mine from 7th grade, which was published in my school's literary magazine, and it is called The Flickerings. The second was written just this past year by me, and it is a revised version of my 7th grade story, The Flickerings. And so you guys get to hear both today. So the first piece is called The Flickerings. I wrote this in 7th grade, which I can definitely tell through reading it back. So hope you enjoy this one. The first time it happened was in 2020. It's become a once a week thing. What am I talking about, you may ask? I'm talking about the flickerings. Originally, the flickerings happened for a second or two. Over time, those seconds grew into minutes, and eventually hours. Flickerings are when every supposed mythical creature becomes visible. You would think it would be cause for delight and wonder to see every creature you've ever heard of. That's what I thought. That's what the whole world thought at first. My name is Cecilia, and I was born in 2017, 3 years before the flickerings started. I don't really remember what it was like before the flickerings, but my parents have told me stories. They tell me about how wonderful life was, how excited they were to have a daughter and everything they thought I would do, how successful I would be. That was long ago. In a world where people didn't live in fear for their lives. It's now 2032 and I'm 15. The flickerings used to bring me such joy as a child. For a few seconds every year the creatures appeared and everyone watched and laughed. In 2021, the flickerings started happening twice and for 5 seconds. In 2022, the flickerings happened every 2 months and for a minute. Scientists began looking deeper into them and found the creatures were dangerous. After this, people began to fear the flickerings. The government started recording what day they happened and found a pattern. In 2023, the flickerings started happening every month for 5 minutes. After 2023, everything stayed the same until 2029. In 2029, everything began to change. And fast. Flickerings started happening every week, and it was unpredictable. The period of time they lasted also became unpredictable. My parents both became incredibly stressed, and one day my dad was caught out in a flickering. We never saw him again. My mom soon became depressed and moody and stopped working. We lost our only source of income, and I knew I had to do something. In 2030, my mom finally died. She had been teetering on the edge of life and death for a year, and it had finally happened. I was alone. Luckily, I had gotten a job after my dad died and had been providing for my mom and I. Now that I didn't have to keep buying expensive medicine, I would have more money to keep in case of an emergency. That's pretty much my life so far, and I hate it. I have almost no friends, and the flickerings are awful. Today I was caught outside my apartment during one and barely made it out alive. I was on my way home from work. I had gotten a job researching about the flickerings. It was a Wednesday, and I had to get back home. The government recommended staying inside as much as possible until that week's flickerings had passed. This week's flickering was still going on, and I was worried. I slowly picked up my pace from a walk to a jog. I had to get home. As the apartment building came into view, I sighed in relief. I was almost home. I was about to start running when something grabbed me. I twisted and found that a creature was holding me. I gasped and started thrashing. I was starting to wish I had taken a mythology course so I knew what this thing was. I managed to kick my shoe into its eye, I had no idea how, and burst into a run. I was also starting to wish I'd utilized the treadmill my parents had bought before the flickerings. I was out of breath by the time I reached my apartment, but I was still alive. Suddenly a question popped into my head. Why didn't the beast chase me into the building? Why were we safe in buildings? I decided to do some snooping on my own. I had been in my apartment for hours, poring over mythology books and trying to figure out why the creatures didn't enter any buildings. I had finally found a clue, and I began to think. What if these creatures are allergic to something we use in our buildings? What if they are scared? What if they fear us as much as we fear them? I glanced over at my clock as all these thoughts ran through my head. It was 2 a.m. I had to hope that this flickering lasted long enough that there was no work tomorrow. I quickly went through my evening routine and hopped in bed. The last thoughts circling through my head before I fell into a deep slumber was, I hope there's no work tomorrow and my theories are right. I awoke to a scream. I glanced out my window and gasped. My neighbor, Annalise, was outside, and the creature from last night was bearing down on her.
Annalise had always protected me and helped me when my dad and mom died. I owed her everything. I rushed outside. If there was ever a time when I needed to utilize my plan, now was the time. I just hoped it worked. As I ran outside, I jumped in front of Annalise. "Stop!" I screamed. "What are you doing? Get back!" Annalise yelled at me. I screamed at the creature, channeling all my anger at the world, my parents' deaths, and how I would feel if Annalise died, and then I attacked. I had found a sword and my dad's old stuff, and it was time to put my plan into action. I hurled myself at the creature and started a vicious dance of slashing, stabbing, and dodging. I finally managed to hit it with a final fatal strike. The creature collapsed to the ground, groaning in pain. Slowly the life seeped out of it, and its shaking and groaning finally stopped. Annalise grabbed me and pulled me into a tight hug. She began to cry as she pulled me tighter. "Oh my God! Why? Thank you so much! I can't believe you did that! Wow! How did you learn to do that?" "I have no idea how I did that," I breathlessly returned. "I need you to trust me." A rough voice rasped off to the side. I jumped away from Annalise and looked over. A tall man stood over to our right, and I jumped. "Come with me," he said mysteriously, "if you want to live." The man grabbed my arm and started walking. "You," he said, pointing to Annalise, "go back in your apartment and stay inside. I will take care of her." He leaned forward and whispered something to her. She nodded and pulled me close. "I love you so much. I may not be your mother, and I know I could never replace her, but I've always loved you as a daughter. Please, always remember me." Annalise took a step back and ran back into her apartment. The guy grabbed me and pulled me after him. He pushed me into his car and jumped into the driver's seat. I decided I might as well fall asleep, and slowly I began to doze off. I was awoken by a jolt. The car had stopped in front of a huge, mansion-like house. "We're here," the man announced. "Where?" I questioned. "Our house." "Our?" "Yes, I live with a group of people. We are an organization that helps protect others from the Flickerings. We want you to become one of us," he said. "That sword's nice. You wield it well," he added. "Do I have a choice?" "Of course. We just wish you to be aware that you may die, and the Flickerings, well, they have stopped." "Stopped?" I shouted. "Then why are we needed?" "That's because it has become permanent. The creatures will never go away. Ever." "What?" I said in confusion. "Then shouldn't I stay with Annalise and protect her?" "No. Our goal is to wipe out every dangerous beast that is in the world. Oh, and don't be alarmed when we walk in." "Why would I be alarmed?" I asked. In response, he grabbed my arm and dragged me inside. Inside were dozens of mythical creatures and hundreds of people. "What's going on?" I exclaimed. "Allow me to explain." "That would be appreciated." "Our organization name is Myth. We help the mythical creatures that are good, and in return, they help us fight the mythical creatures that are a danger to society. Are you in? We could use another member. Plus, if we wipe out all the dangerous creatures, we will need help introducing these helpful creatures to society. Now that you know the facts, are you in?" "Yes," I said slowly. "Our world may still be in danger because of these creatures, but these people have helped me learn to fight back. Eventually, I convinced them to bring Annalise here. Annalise may not fight, but she has become like a mother to me. Maybe by 2040, all the dangerous mythical creatures will be gone. But really, who knows? All I know for sure is that I'm going to do everything I can to save my world and create a wonderful life for everyone. Even if it means I die trying, so be it. I know I've helped protect the innocent and the world, and if that isn't a cause worth dying for, I don't know what is." Okay, now that I'm done cringing at my 7th grade writing, I wrote this one last year, and it is on my Patreon page alongside a couple of other stories all set in the same universe. This one is called The Flickerings, The Beginning. I also changed character names, so don't be confused. I just kind of didn't love the character names I chose from the short story in 7th grade. So yeah, the first time it happened was in 2020. It's become a once-a-week thing. What am I talking about, you may ask? I'm talking about the Flickerings. Originally, the Flickerings happened for a second or two. Over time, those seconds grew into minutes, and eventually hours. Flickerings are when every supposed mythical creature becomes visible. You would think it would be cause for delight and wonder to see every mythical creature you had ever heard of. That's what I thought. That's what the whole world thought at first. I don't really remember what it was like before the Flickerings started, but my parents have told me stories. They tell me about how wonderful life was, how excited they were to have a daughter and everything they thought I would do, how successful I would be. That was long ago, in a world where people didn't live in fear for their lives. It's now 2032 and I am 17. The Flickerings used to bring me such joy as a child. For a few seconds every year the creatures appeared, and everyone watched it and laughed. As the years passed, the Flickerings slowly began to grow longer, so scientists began looking deeper into them and found the creatures could cause us harm. After this, people began to fear the Flickerings. The government started recording what happened daily and found a pattern. Then, in 2029, everything began to change, and fast. Flickerings started happening every week, and they became unpredictable. My parents both became progressively more and more tense, and one day my dad was caught out in a flickering. We never saw him again. For months, my mother insisted that he would be back. He couldn't be gone. After a while, it became clear that Dad wasn't coming home, and while I threw myself into school and learning, my mom became depressed and moody and stopped working, which meant we lost our only source of income, and I knew I had to do something. In 2030, my mom finally died. She had been teetering on the edge of life and death for a year, and then it happened. I was alone, other than my neighbor, May. Luckily, I had gotten a job after my dad died, and had been providing for my mom and I. After the Flickerings had become a once-a-week thing, the rich fled to highly protected mansions, leaving the rest of us to fend for ourselves, and prices to skyrocket. Without a job, we wouldn't have had food or been able to keep our apartment. Of course, I could always move in with May, but there was something about her that left me slightly unsettled. Plus, now that I didn't have to keep buying expensive medicine, I would have more money to keep in case of an emergency. I was on my way home from work when I was caught out in a flickering. The bells that signaled the beginning of a flickering started ringing, and I froze. The noise echoed around my head, and I could feel the reverberations from the sound as my eyes darted around the street. I was only about 5 minutes from my apartment, but I couldn't force myself to move. My limbs were heavy, and I had flashes to the old horror movies my dad and I used to watch together. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping that would help me catch my bearings, but it did nothing to help. My breathing was coming in short gasps, and all I could think about was how this must have been how my dad felt. Was he able to fight back, or was he frozen too? And then something was grabbing my arm, and I whirled around to see a creature, its claws slowly sinking into my arm. It was a dark blue, and it almost looked like an octopus. It had a number of long tentacles and a dozen or so eyes covering its head. I tried to scream, but I couldn't get myself to move. I had to fight back. I wouldn't let myself die like this. I took a deep breath before swinging my leg forward and slamming my foot into one of the creature's eyes. It let out a shriek before throwing me across the street. My arms flew up to protect my head as I went flying, and my legs scraped against something as I hit the ground. I slowly climbed to my feet before taking off in a sprint. I had to make it home. I could do this. The ground beneath me raced by as I ran faster than I think I ever have. I passed a couple of creatures on my way and prayed that nothing was chasing me. I slammed into the entrance to my apartment building, and with shaking hands, I reached into my pocket to pull out a key. I slammed into the entrance to my apartment building, and with shaking hands, I reached into my pocket to pull out a key. I fumbled to open the door, forcing myself to take deep breaths to curb my growing panic. "Adri!" a voice called as I tumbled into the building, slamming the door behind me. I looked up to find May, the kind lady who lived next door to me. She smiled down at me, and as much as normally she unsettled me, I just needed comfort from someone. "May," I gasped out, stumbling forward, tears beginning to fall. "Oh, honey, what happened?" May asked, pulling me into a hug. I was caught by a creature. I couldn't move. I was frozen. I said I would fight back if I was attacked, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. I gasped out, and May's arms tightened around me. "Oh, dear, let's get you up to your apartment, and we can start a fire and have some tea," May said, gently tugging me towards the stairs. I followed her up the stairs, feeling completely numb. As May opened my door, I let out a gasp of pain, and my right leg buckled under me, causing May to lunge to grab me. I looked down at my leg to see it covered in blood, my pants torn. "May," I whispered, before my vision began to fade, and I fought to keep my eyes open. May was saying something that I couldn't hear, and I knew I couldn't let myself fall asleep. I had to stay awake. But my eyelids were too heavy, and I slowly surrendered to the darkness. "May," I croaked out, peeling my eyes open. My throat was dry, and I couldn't feel much of anything. "Oh, honey, how are you feeling?" May asked, and I groaned. How long was I out for?" "About 2 days," May whispered, and I squeezed my eyes shut. What about my job? I asked, and May flinched. Don't worry about that, she said, and I glared at her. She wasn't telling me something. How's your leg feeling? She asked. It's not too bad, but please, May, what about my job? I asked. What happened? The flickerings stopped, May whispered, and my eyes widened. What? I gasped, and May bit her lip. They're permanent now, she said, and I froze. Oh my God, I whispered, and May nodded. Will you be okay if I run to my apartment for a little while? I need to grab some things. Yeah, I whispered, and May pulled me into a hug. I'll be back, she said, standing up and walking to the door, shooting me one last smile as she left. I slowly sat up, looking down at my leg. May had bandaged it, and I slowly set it down on the ground. I had to check my dad's stuff, especially if this was permanent. I gradually put weight on my leg and found that it hurt a bit, but wasn't unbearable. I slowly limped to my parents' old room and pulled the chest out from under their bed. Taking a deep breath, I opened it again for the first time since their death, and pulled out my dad's sword. Sitting next to it was a bunch of notebooks and other papers, and nestled at the bottom was a dagger. I heard the door to my apartment creak open, and I slowly set the sword back down, shutting the chest and slipping it back under my parents' bed. I felt I couldn't trust May with the knowledge. On top of her unsettling behavior, I had a bad feeling about her learning about the sword. I curled up beside the door after I hid the chest again. I knew May would buy that I just needed to be close to my family. Adri, May called, and I let out a sob. I had mastered the art at crying at will. Back before the flickerings had started, back when I wanted to be an actress. I listened as May's steps grew closer to my parents' door before I tensed again. There was a second set of footsteps. Before I could do anything, the door creaked open, and I looked to see May in the doorway with another woman standing behind her. May? I asked, wiping at the tears on my face. Adri, I'm so sorry, honey, but this is Bridget. I didn't want to keep this from you. I didn't want to keep anything from you, but I guess it's time. Your parents always were trouble. I would hate to have to deal with your trouble. May whispered, and I closed my eyes. I didn't want to know what May's cryptic message meant. Hello, the woman said, and I looked up at her as May left, shutting the door behind her. My name is Bridget. I'm assuming you are Adri? I nodded, and she continued. I knew your parents. Your father was crucial in discovering what was going on with the flickerings, but he placed too much trust into the creatures, which was ultimately his undoing. We worked together in the government, but a lot of us disliked the way the government was handling the flickerings. So we left. We started our own organization called Myth, and we want you to join.
Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed listening to my old story and my new story, and I will be doing more of these in the future. If you like my writing, you can check me out on Patreon. Link will be down below. See you next time. Thank you.